Hey listeners, it's Alex, your host of EOA, the show where we talk to founders, investors, and entrepreneurs making a difference in this region, in this world. Today's episode, just like many of our guests, is a global guest. While he is originally American-Korean, we managed to work together in Vietnam, but he is now based in Paris, building a cryptocurrency startup that happens to be funded by the likes of Consensus, which is a blockchain company whose founder is the founder of the Ethereum token, and other VCs like SOSV and Emergo. The main chapters in this episode discuss the Asian American identity, which nicely ties back to episode 17 with Yorlin Ung, where we touch upon women in leadership and juggling multiple identities. If you're interested, go ahead and check that out too. In the next chapter, we discuss Justin's early career in corporate, where we learn about working in North Asia and comparing those experiences from Japan, Korea to Southeast Asia. Towards the middle, we discuss how Justin transitioned from corporate into Rocket Internet, where we both worked and were a part of the founding team of Zalora, and discuss hiring for venture-funded businesses and when you should bootstrap or hire more. After Rocket Internet, interestingly enough, Justin discusses his choice to return back to business school, which he postponed, and somehow after his MBA, returned back to startups and venture building, where he then discusses his first seeded company in the printing space that sort of worked out, but eventually led him to founding a different company, Quidli, a cryptocurrency wallet which is easy and convenient to use if you're interested in getting your feet wet in the crypto space. For the last section, we discussed cryptocurrency and Quidli and the nature of cryptocurrency, where it's headed, the next evolutions of fiat to digitalization, and much more. As usual, feel free to skip around the topics if your app platform allows it. Let's dive right in. All right, Justin, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. This is my first kind of podcast style interview.
Yes,
I've done
I'm very
small
excited too.
Interviews and stuff before, but never online.
Yeah, so the first long form podcast, right? So today we have Justin An, right?
Yep.
Co-founder and CEO of a company called Quidli, right? So I guess we'll get into that later, what that is. But I guess to start off, brief intro. I guess you could say we were once enemies, turned friends now, right?
I wouldn't say we were enemies, but sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was some animosity at certain points, but we always managed to work together somehow. There was friction. I guess for anyone watching video, you could see, he looks kind of like a K-drama pop star almost. On a good day with some makeup. He's quite, how tall are you?
183 centimeters.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so with some good posture, looks like a K-drama star. You can see his LinkedIn, the picture, very good. He's a father of two beautiful children, right?
They're cute. I don't know. Beautiful, I don't know, but they're cute.
You can't say things like that about your kids.
I mean, you see baby magazines and there's really beautiful children. I feel like my kids are more on the cute side.
Those are models, yeah. I don't know. I don't find babies that cute anyway. So I'm we're just saying terrible things right now. You speak what? You speak 4 or 5 languages?
Well, I guess how do you define speak, right? Obviously I speak English very well. My Korean is pretty good. It's native. I would say it's native. My wife sometimes will say no. But, my Japanese is decent. Although since I haven't been in Asia for the past 6 years and rarely speak it anymore, I feel like, so I live in France. I don't know if you're going to say that, but, my French is probably the weakest of all my languages, but just because I've been living here for 7 years now, it kind of seeps over a lot of things now. Sometimes I'll try to speak Japanese with Japanese people and a French word will come out or,
Yeah. I mean, that's some of the problems when you learn so many languages. I mean, I'm not nowhere as skillful on my other languages, but I do, if I'm trying to speak another language, other words will come up. So that makes sense. So we can follow you on Twitter, right? AHN ongoing. Sure. Oh, I get it now. I was trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean? It's like ongoing, but ongoing. Okay. AHN. Okay. You changed that recently, right?
What do you mean?
I think you had a different handle before. Was it always ongoing?
It was always. I mean, I only started Twitter like 2 years ago, and it's
Oh,
always
okay,
been
okay,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, I know I was reading them last night, and they are quite nice. They're not like a lot of people say like crazy stuff, like either it comes off narcissistic, out of touch, but like I think yours is pretty grounded, so it's quite nice. I think worth
I think
following.
it's fortunate that I started Twitter much, much, much later.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
maybe if I
True, true,
started
true, true.
Twitter, you'd see some horrible things, but like, I mean, I started when I was already
Yeah,
with a kid, so like, perspective, I guess.
becoming a father, becoming an adult.
Yeah, and generally, like, I mean, today we are like most people know, saying crazy things on social media generally tends not to get you good
Oh
things.
yeah, yeah, definitely not. Well, it depends. Some people like bad PR, right? They say all PR is PR.
Yeah,
So
I haven't reached that
um,
stage yet. Maybe one day.
maybe with more success, you'll give less of care what
Yeah,
other people think. You're also a bit of an artist, right? You have the same handle for Instagram, and you post really beautiful photos of Paris all the time. And I'm really jealous. That's something you picked up a few years ago, or maybe
I'd
5+ years
say.
ago, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like Instagram is really what turned me on to social media a lot more. Like I wasn't
yeah,
like a big social media guy before,
yeah.
but I really appreciated the visual. I wouldn't call myself an artist, but it's more
Yeah,
the city of Paris that's beautiful that I can just snap anything and it looks great.
yeah,
But I don't know. I guess the visual aspect of it appealed to me a lot more compared to like Facebook or Twitter, where you'd have to say something or like you feel
yeah.
compelled to
I see
say
what you mean.
something.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's less. It's more my style, I guess, to just visually. I like it
Express
more
yourself.
to be able to visually express. Yeah,
Okay,
but
that's
you
fair.
can follow me on Instagram if you'd like.
I think it's public, right? I think it's public. So
Yeah, it's public. You'll just see
yeah.
pictures of the city. Occasionally, my family.
Yeah, but more importantly, you also have a company Twitter, which is the Quidli protocol, which is QUIDLI Quidli and protocol, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Please
cool.
follow us. Actually, it's more important that you use us, but sure, follow.
Same. I mean, you got to get them interested, and then maybe, if they're converted over to, which we'll talk later, the crypto space, the cryptocurrency space, then yeah, definitely join, right? So I wanted to talk about you first personally, and I think I'm gonna like anyone who's my friend who's like Asian American. I definitely want to talk about some of these topics. So also to get to know you better and for the audience. You are American born. Well, no, sorry, you're Korean born or American born?
No, I was born in the U.S. actually.
Okay, so you're American born Korean from Maryland.
Yeah, I was born in New York, but I pretty much grew up
Grew up in
in
Maryland.
Maryland. Yeah.
Okay, do you feel any relation to New York, or just more home in Maryland is like more home?
I mean, if I'm honest, like Maryland is more home, but like, when you grow up, I mean, when you're a kid, or not even like I guess I lived there till I was 7. So, you get you develop, I guess it was where I developed some early things. Like, I wear an Orioles cap today, but like, just cause I don't feel like I can justify wearing a Yankees cap, but like my first baseball games were in Yankee Stadium, things like that.
Yeah,
And like you grew up like eating New York pizza and stuff like that. So like, I mean, and my father was there for like 20 years or something like that. So he feels, even though he's now been in Maryland for like 20+ years, he always feels like he's a New Yorker at heart.
okay.
So
Okay.
that part kind of seeps into me.
That's interesting. There's even more identity dynamics going on of where you come from, and I guess for our Asian audience, the Orioles is the baseball team for Maryland, or
Yeah, the Baltimore Orioles. Yeah.
the Baltimore Orioles.
When I first moved there, it was actually a really good dynamic. They were good, and they were fighting for the American League East pennant with the Yankees often. But frankly speaking, since the 90s, they've just been terrible. And it's more, just kind of association from where you're from that keeps me.
Yeah. That's very American thing, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
I was never really into sports. Like my family was not into that, so I missed that cultural aspect.
Sure. It's baseball though.
Like
American football, I don't care anything. Like the Washington Redskins or whatever they're called now, like that doesn't bother me. Like the Ravens, I don't really care. But baseball has always been the big thing.
Yeah, but I guess also for your part of the world and my part of the world now,
football or American soccer, right?
Oh,
That's
soccer.
probably the big thing, right?
Yeah, and it's not something I really got into. So even though I'm in Europe now, like it really doesn't interest me when people talk about it.
Yeah,
The big
yeah,
things
yeah,
like
yeah.
in Paris, like when Neymar came here, or who was another big player? I mean, all the French, I guess, like Pogba and Mbappe and all that stuff. But yeah, it doesn't excite me as much as like a good game of baseball.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so for the first question, what does it mean to be an ABK, American born Korean?
you know, um, that's an interesting question. I think that you could probably say a lot of things that would just go
Mm,
like on forever.
yeah, for
I
you
mean,
though.
yeah, frankly speaking, I don't know. I never really thought of it much as a kid.
Hmm.
I'd been pretty, I feel, like privileged, I guess. It's a weird word to say today. I was lucky, I guess. I grew up in an area that was fairly ethnically diverse.
Yeah.
Socioeconomically, probably not so much, which probably explains why I felt okay and comfortable. Like there were white kids, black kids, Asian kids, Hispanic
Hmm.
kids, and it wasn't like that weird a thing. And so
Hmm.
it wasn't something I thought about much as a child, other than like at home or with my family and things like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure some people will highly disagree, but I felt very comfortable growing up in America, and it never really occurred to me to really feel like I need. I mean, much older, like as you grow up, it never really occurred to me to identify as Korean, quote unquote. I think
Yeah.
that's something that more openly came up later. Not just for me,
Okay.
but for people as a whole. Like it just
Okay.
became
So
like a bigger thing to like identify as your ethnic, I guess, identity. And
okay. So, and you were because you were born what 1985.
yeah, 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 mid
Okay,
'80s.
so well, actually, it's pretty much the same generation, 2 years before me. But I don't know. Like in my experience, I mean, we're both East Coast, so and there's a smaller minority of Asians, I guess you could say, on the East Coast. And but
Oh yeah, it's not like
the Korean,
California or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. So I mean, I don't know. The Korean people that I knew, like they were highly aware, and I mean, it's not like all the face in your face hoorah, but like if it did come up, they'd be very proud about being Korean. So
yeah,
at
yeah.
least
I
that's
mean,
around my circles. Yeah.
no, that's true. I think there were people like that. I guess less me. Like for example, in my neighborhood, there was like no other Korean family, so it was really just my parents and my sibling, my sister,
Yeah.
that were kind of in that environment. At school, there were a few. I mean, the biggest exposure. My parents, like most, I think, Asian or at least Korean American kids, like they started going to church.
Okay.
It
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
Protestant though; it was Catholic, which is, I think, less common. But
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
where I had more exposure to other Korean American kids. But I mean, I guess even as a child, I always felt it was weird to kind of identify just ethnically because
Mm.
um, in my church, yeah, there were a lot of kids who were like proud of being Korean or whatever that means, and like they would be into like what would become the massive like K-pop thing. Like they would be into it then as well.
Yeah. 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 Very early.
Really identified with that, and so it wasn't until much, and it was always a weird dynamic too. It's like, what does it mean to be? I mean, you could do an entire podcast separately on
Yeah. Of
this,
course.
and
Exactly.
what does it
Exactly.
mean to be like something else when you live in America? Like, if in my experience, at least most Korean American kids, like, they don't even really speak Korean. Like, there's very little exposure to like what it actually is and what it's like in Korea today, or at the
Yeah.
time. Like, is it simply just being around other ethnically Korean people and enjoying parts of that pop culture? Or
Hmm.
so I mean, like, it was something I just didn't really get into
Engage
that
with.
way. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I really mostly just preferred to play with my friends in my neighborhood. like,
Yeah.
basketball or skateboarding or things like that. I mean, it was stuff you identified and related to out of like proximity rather than by ethnicity. And at least in my experience growing up, that was normal, I guess. It didn't really, I mean, not to say that there weren't instances of like being different or like even like discrimination, but like, I mean, to be fair, it was kind of like all around, it wasn't just like other kids picking on me for being Asian. I remember like
viewpoint.
You would pick on other people too for being different. Like
the
Asian kid, the black kid, the white kid. It was just kind of all around 360 like micro discriminations, which is horrible in today's context. But that's just, I mean, if I try to think about times where I felt discriminated against, I can also remember times where I was probably discriminatory. And so it's like a weird, I guess that's a weird realization, but at the same time, I would say we dealt with it. I don't know. Today, you'd probably be like, what did you internalize and how did that affect you as an adult or something?
Yeah.
It was kind of normal, I felt.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to ask you, like, in the context of being called out, of being different. But it sounds like, you took everything on the chin. Would you say it's more personality versus environment then? Or?
I mean, yeah, how would you, I don't know how myself back then would answer this. Like maybe it was more traumatic at the time, but I don't know, but definitely by high school, you kind of just grew into it.
Yeah.
A bit. If you asked me in like primary school or middle school, like maybe it would have been a different answer. But by high school, you're starting to be more comfortable in your own skin, I guess, quote unquote. By then I was a lot more comfortable being who I wanted to be, and I think it kind of shows. I hope it kind of shows today. Like, you don't want to downplay it, because I think as an older person, I've benefited a lot from like being ethnically Korean and being able to like speak and like function in Korea and things like that. But at the same time, like I think I would not. It would be a disservice to kind of say like, because it's not something you choose, right? It's a genetic it's a genetic lottery. So I've always thought it's a little weird to be proud of your ethnicity solely for the sake of that being your ethnicity.
I mean, yeah. Well, I think it could be also interpreted as a defense mechanism to, people treating you differently, so you embrace that, and then to have power over it, this kind of thing. And I guess from my experience, it was more of a subconscious rejection of Asian identity, and so maybe it's something I struggled with more. But I don't know. Do you feel like you struggled with identity as you got older and as it evolved, or pretty stable from high school onwards?
I think from high school onwards, it's stable. I mean, if you bring it up like that, I think as a younger kid, there was some, like, middle school, there was some, like, tension in that regard. But it was mostly because, like, I didn't feel comfortable with the idea of, like, why should my ethnicity determine, who I hang out with or who how I interact with other people. So, I mean, there was some friction earlier on. But I don't know. Like, as an adult, I feel like that matters less and less, but it's hard to kind of, again, this could be a huge conversation on its own. Like the way the climate is today, it's hard to determine whether I think about this stuff if it wasn't as so readily pushed via social media. Like there's so many things like trying to get people to individualize more and like embrace whatever you feel is your identity. So that, I mean, those kind of things trigger things in you yourself when you read them, right? I mean, I think it does to me. So like, would I think about it less if it was not discussed as much? I don't know. Like, I feel like the way the discussions go today, it makes you reflect on a lot of things more. And some things are really, I think, worth reflecting on. But at the same time, like, Yeah, personally, I try not to make a huge deal about it. It's not. I hope it's not what defines me. And
that's fair. That's fair. So I guess two last questions about this before we move to your early career. How do you think about this context then for your children who you are Korean American, your wife is Korean, but you're both in Paris raising them. They're very French, I'm sure, at this point. Are you worried for them, or you don't care? You just let it be, let them struggle?
That's kind of wild, right? To think about that. My oldest is she's 4 now. She's attended public school in France up to. They start pretty early. I don't think it's compulsory school, but from 3, basically, they're like, send your kid to a public school. And so we've been doing that. And she went to preschool before that at 2. And so at home, we so far up to now, we speak 100% Korean. And so my daughter, her first language, if there is something considered a first language, it's Korean. With us, she primarily speaks with Korean. It's her most comfortable language so far, because home is where she interacts the most. But after now over 2 years of school environment exposure, already her French accent is like impeccably French. I wouldn't say her language skills are fully there yet, because it takes time to kind of rewire all those things. I think I like to brag, but it's not really a brag. It's more like I think my French is still better than hers solely because I understand more. Obviously
that will change fast.
Yeah, exactly. It's already like she'll when she listens to me speak French, like she'll correct my pronunciation of things, and it's so aggravating to see like a 4-year-old in a French accent try to like correct your French.
That's so funny.
Man, what the hell? I can see it seeping into her now, where it's like at home now she'll be like, "Can we speak French?" And I'm like, if you want, I don't know if I'm really going to help you, but we can. And then we have the external pressure of we have like our parents and other people, even here in France, people are like, so are you going to teach her English? Like, the way the world is today, like English is a huge asset. You should. I mean, it would be a shame for your kid not to to be able to be a native speaker. It's an interesting dynamic, the way we've situated ourselves. I mean, I kind of want to hold back on communicating with my daughter in English, my kids in English, because I kind of like talking to them in Korean. Like it feels it was my familial language, and I feel comfortable in that kind of family environment. From the dynamics change when you talk to someone in English versus Korean. I think. And so I want to keep that for as long as possible, and it caveated with the fact that I think today most like people in our kind of socioeconomic set, like English is such a readily available language. Everyone speaks English really well. Like even in Paris, like younger people, the younger generation from our generation on, it's not their English is good. They speak English really well. So I think it's something she'll just inherently take over because just by the nature of how kind of global her family already is. Like me, her father, her mother is Korean, but her family moved to Canada when she was like 20. Now we're living in France. I mean, there's just no way that, in my mind, that she won't pick up English just as quickly. I mean, even the videos she recently got an Amazon Fire tablet, and like all the videos she likes watching are English videos.
Okay, pick it up really fast then.
Yeah.
Your English will be better than yours soon too. So
I mean, yeah, at some point, like even French kids today, it's all YouTube, right? And they speak English very well, in my opinion. So it's not something I'm so concerned about, but we'll see. Maybe talk to me again in a few years, and maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting story because my father and my parents, growing up in America, they were worried because they know like funny accents and being different could traumatize you if you're pointed out for that. And so they made a point to speak English at home. So, I mean, of course, when I was 3 years old, I was speaking Vietnamese only as well, right? But that's like at a 3-year-old level, that's like nothing. So I mean, that was always kind of back there. As soon as I went to nursery school, everything just switched to English. And then, it's like I struggle now to work backwards to learn the native language, Vietnamese. And but they made a very deliberate choice that, and even today at home, we're just going to be speaking English. I'll try to speak Vietnamese to them. They'll just respond back in English. So it's just like very different
did
dynamic,
your
I
parents,
guess.
both of them immigrate pretty early? Or
Oh yeah, they were really 17 and 18 years old, right? So very early on. So they were.
So their English is probably really good, though, right?
Yeah, there's no accents, nothing. So
my father immigrated similar time, and he speaks. Okay. I wouldn't say like 100% perfect, but I mean he speaks like a native speaker. Like whereas my mother, she only went after getting married in her late 20s, I think. That she's probably a key reason why I retained Korean, and then they sent me like to elementary school there. I went back regularly. I mean, if it were up to my father, we'd probably be more kind of Americanized, quote unquote. But I think parents. Yeah, for sure. The environment you grow up in plays a big role in like how you interact with the kid. It really plays a big role in the sort of, I don't know. Today there's like this big rush to like, oh, you got to teach them all these like languages. But I think just by being curious and open parents I think that will trickle down to your kids as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess the whole main point of this, and for the last question of the personal section is, so in what kind of ways do you think your identities, the different identities, and being different has either served or helped you in the context of you being an entrepreneur?
Being an entrepreneur, in terms of work, though, a lot. To be honest, I'm not sure how it would apply to being an entrepreneur, but the way my career has developed, for sure, significantly. I
mean, that's also part of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't start as someone who wanted to build their own company or anything like that, or do their own business. Out of university, I just wanted to be someone who had a job that paid reasonably well. And because I had lived in Japan during university for an exchange,
right? Yeah.
An interest in Japan and going back. If you speak Korean reasonably well, learning Japanese is much easier. It's like if you're a Spanish speaker and you learn French or vice versa. As long as you make the effort, you can make progress quickly. And so I really I did that, and I got my first job at a Japanese company.
Oh, you did? Okay, so that's not on your LinkedIn though.
Oh man, I need to update. Like LinkedIn is such a weird platform. Like I guess it's great to kind of serve as a Rolodex, but like at a certain point, the value is just like really, it's just like people spamming you to use their services over and over. So I don't really but yeah, I mean, I guess it was so long ago, back in 2007. I wasn't even on LinkedIn, so I didn't even like think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's how I got my first job. Then I moved to Korea just because I think there was just a lot more things happening. I liked being in Asia. There were a lot more things happening in Asia, so there was no immediate interest for me to go back to the U.S. It was exciting.
Okay.
I was a lot of things happening. As you know, I think you did kind of a similar thing, right? You moved out there at a certain point, and there was. I imagine there still is. I don't know. You can tell me, but there was a big dynamic overall in the region of like, while this was around 2007, 2008 when I started working, and while there was that financial crisis that were making people pessimistic in the U.S., in Asia things were like booming.
Yeah,
and exciting. I moved on to Korea, where I stayed for 5 years, maybe.
You moved for KPMG, right?
Yeah, I was working with KPMG while I was at Korea. While I was in Korea, I was doing financial advisory, helping with cross-border transactions, like merchants. I mean, like I said, it was a really dynamic time. The Korean economy was booming. Samsung Mobile, for example, like with the emergence of Samsung Electronics, was just like that boom was trickling everywhere. So it was a lot of cross-border transactions happening. Korean companies were more flush with cash, and they were trying to buy up a lot of other entities and assets overseas. It was an exciting time, a lot of things to do, and so they needed people that spoke both Korean and English to facilitate these engagements and things like that. So I would say my background helped tremendously in that regard. Despite me saying like it's not a big deal to me, professionally it was a huge asset to be able to speak and work in Korean. And it was also what got me into tech startups, I guess. With Rocket. Rocket was my first kind of startup experience, so to speak. And likewise, when they started recruiting to expand into Asia, they were looking for Asia-based professionals that had kind of like a Western mindset, I guess, that had experience with Western companies and Western work cultures. And that's, I think, that's how pretty much I got connected with Rocket and started working there. Like the same with the guy who brought me in there, Stephen Chung. I mean, that was his kind of entry point into Rocket. And so, I guess the background did play a big role into me ultimately staying in startups and tech and now doing what I do now.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is like your background as being first international, being kind of foreign in America, even though you are also very American, having different identities basically served you very well to be more. I guess you're riding the wave of globalization. Essentially, you're taking
it positioned me very. That's a good way of saying it. It positioned me well for that.
And then what kind of ways do you think it maybe has held you back or done a disservice for you? Do you think
held me back?
Or nothing negative.
I mean, nothing evidently negative. If there was, either I'm not aware of, or it was insignificant enough where I'm not thinking about it now. I think less being Asian, but just kind of being foreign in Europe. I think something like if you're kind of like me or you in Asia. Oh, I don't know how it is today. It might have changed because there's a lot of people with Western kind of backgrounds in Asia now that have rode that wave, right? To much greater and more successful extents than I have. So I think in Korea itself, there was at a certain point a kind of resentment towards people like that as well, because it's like, well, you don't really understand the culture here, or you don't really understand like the environment here. So there's like ups and downs to that, but it wasn't so bad in my own experience, at least. In Europe, I guess sometimes it's weird. It's more, I think visually to the average person, I'm Asian, not American, but from a working context, because in Europe, it's a lot about documentation. It's a lot about like it's very clear I'm American. Like setting up a company, I have to show my passport. I have to when I go to the bank, I have to show my passport, and that's kind of an advantage, I guess. Like, people are like, I don't know what it'd be like to show like another passport, like from like more like a developing country or something. But if you flash an American passport, it's like, oh, okay, like we're not going to give. In general, obviously this is a generality, but it's like you tend to not be given as much shit as someone who's got a different kind of passport. But at the same time, I think, especially in tech, in terms of like venture-backed things, it's not so catered to people who are not from here. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, less on the ethnicity part and more just like there's compared to U.S. venture, for example, and you probably know Asia venture better than me now since you've been there a lot longer. U.S. venture, it's obviously it's a return-based business, but at the same time, there's a willingness to take risk, right? That's kind of what venture is all about, especially at the early stages. Here, even it's funny because like they adopt the language of U.S. VCs. Like it's all about the early stage. Like it's like trust the founder. It's like you got to back
in Europe. You're saying, right?
Yeah, in Europe. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's really just like window dressing. Like you can adopt like the California language and stuff like that, but you don't see that in the deal flows. Like there's very little early stage. It's still very premature. I can imagine some European VC will be like, "No, that's not true at all. Look at our look at our deal flow. Look at the chart." Like, seriously, there's really little infrastructure for early stage. There'll be like an accelerator or an incubator, and they'll be like, we'll give you space and we'll charge that for like 5% up front. And like, that'll count as like money that we give to you and that you're burning for fuel. And it's like, that kind of stuff gets even harder for foreigners, right?
I see what you mean.
That I think has been challenging in that regard, but I don't know. Yeah, being Asian or being American in general, again, like I maybe it's my outlook. It hasn't really impacted me so differently here.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of interesting things there. Like, so I guess the first point I'd like to talk. I mean, just to briefly mention again is like, I think that dynamic of Asian American coming to Asia and having like a local resentment, it's definitely more of a North Asian thing. I feel like I hear this thing about Taipei and Shanghai, right? You know, ABC's coming in. I guess now you tell me Korea as well. But like living in Southeast Asia for like nearly 10 years, at least I don't, maybe it's because of my bubble. I don't feel anything like this, you know. It's like, I guess it depends how well you could ingratiate yourself with locals, adopt the vernacular, the tendencies, the things, and then, but I definitely don't see that dynamic as much as Southeast Asia.
No, to be fair, the time we spent together in Vietnam, you're. I mean, I wouldn't feel it like what do you call it, a Viet Q, like a Vietnamese diaspora person would feel it, but you're, at least in my observation, it kind of felt like what you say. Yeah, there was more openness, I guess. They were still kind of like, oh, you're one of us kind of thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's funny you say that. It's like, just as long as like, you're not opening your mouth and sounding too American, just because of the way you look, right? You're just going to be kind of accepted and treated as local, right? Whereas, in America growing up, you're different, and sometimes you get called out, and it does. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't stick. Right? That depends on the person and your upbringing. Like you kind of like how you mentioned. For me, I think it affected me more subtly over time, and that's why I was more conscious. So I thought I was very curious to kind of discuss that and see how it kind of developed along your career. But it seems like it more or less net positive for you. And then you kind of made this break to Korea, and you're kind of doing M&A deals. Was that very hard culturally to adjust, or was it just like home for you going to Korea?
Well, to clarify, I wasn't doing M&A deals. Like the partner would be doing M&A deals.
Okay, but you were part of the deals. You were part of the deals.
Yeah, I would be supporting the partner. I mean, like it was early in my career, and I think I was more in an analyst role than anything else. Yeah. No, I mean, I felt comfortable. I liked it. I liked the experience. I liked it much better than working for a Japanese company, for example. Like, speaking of like being other, being Korean American in a Japanese company was really like
Oh God,
feeling
that's
like
gotta be terrible.
dude, I liked the experience. It was a great experience. It was just
okay.
it was just from a, if you think of it purely from a social perspective, though, it's literally just like work, like be in the office, like do the work, and it was just like that's how you're treated. I don't know if you're Japanese, if that would be different, right? There's more of a social dynamic, but for being like a non-Japanese person, there was very little outside of the work itself that kind of entered that professional dynamic. In Korea, it was much different, right? I mean, I felt more at home. I was less a foreigner, and people were more like kind of receptive to me, and so I appreciated that a lot. There was a huge, it was a huge change in environment going from a Japanese company to a Korean office environment. Because even though it was KPMG, it was the Korean affiliate of that, and so it was pretty much a 100% Korean office. And it was much more, for me at least, culturally comfortable.
I mean, it speaks to the nature of. Well, I mean, there's a few things. I think maybe Northern Asian cultures they tend to be more conservative and close off. So if you were Japanese, maybe they might have, like a Japanese American, maybe they might have accepted you a little bit further in.
Possibly.
And they would have been more familiar. But like you being Korean, speaking Korean growing up, maybe that allows you to, reach across the divide more and ingratiate to the locals. Like for me, definitely speaking Vietnamese in Vietnam definitely helps. I mean, like if you're a foreigner, you can get along fine, no problem. But like if you can speak on the same level, even if it's basic, you already are at another place where it's even more comfortable and they're more open, So.
To me, again, this is just my opinion. Nothing I say should be like fact or anything. But my feeling when I was there in that short time was Vietnamese people are generally much more open than Koreans. They're more. I mean, people are just super. I say this as the word itself, not in a negative way, like superficially just friendly. Like people are open.
Almost like an American way. Americans are very superficially friendly.
In a way, yeah, sure. And and that was, I never felt like that was never a problem in Vietnam. Feeling like, oh, I hate the people or something. The people are very nice. That was never kind of something negative in Vietnam. Whereas I can see in like Japan and Korea how people at first glance can be very reticent and not as readily open. Yeah.
And that's interesting you pointed about that you felt better in Korea, but like I would imagine the work culture is pretty much the same as Japan, no? Like, just work. Maybe like you could socialize more?
Yeah, I could socialize more, so that alleviated a lot of it. But
I see.
Certainly a lot of work for sure in a corporate environment, in a services environment, because that's what a financial services firm does, right? You're a service provider. It's not an industry job where you're producing like products. Your product is like the accounting, the auditing, the advisory, the due diligence. And so, certainly, that is a very competitive and work-intensive environment. And but I mean, again, it was much more alleviated by the fact that I could socialize with my colleagues on a more like I consider my colleagues like friends, whereas in Japan, I don't think I stay in touch with any of the colleagues I had when I worked at a Japanese company. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, did you work on any deals or anything that you kind of picked up from, working in a financial advisory, M&A, due diligence, valuation that is useful that you could use today, or was it just all in the past?
Sorry, deals? Like, did I work on any deals that
were probably like that where you developed valuable skills, or something that you picked up along the way that helps you today?
I mean, in general, those early. That early working in corporate environments, for sure. I mean, it gives you structure. It tells you, it informs you on how like work processes and workflows work. It's very well structured. It's very highly structured. That kind of thing. There's protocols for everything. There's templates for everything. I mean, today it's all about the web browser and like all the extensions you have for work on your web browser. Back then, it might be the case today. I haven't gone back to corporate, so I don't know. But it was all about the macros like built into your Microsoft
Yes.
Excel or Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint, the Office suite. Like all companies had their own kind of like macros and visual basic kind of workflows embedded into those things, so you could do like company specific stuff like directly directly in your applications. And so, I mean, I think if anything, those kind of careers in banking or consulting, advisory, things like that, what they do, I mean, people can talk shit about them all they want, but what they do is kind of teach you structure, which is like really hard in a startup, as you probably know. Like
that's the perfect segue, right? Because like right after you did KPMG, you joined Rocket Internet, right? So that must have been quite jarring then, like of how it was like the wild east, right? Like it was like got all like, throw a thing on a wall, see what sticks, just shotgun everything. No process, no structure, at least to start, right? I mean, of course, the end goal is to build something of value and of course make it structured, make it work as a machine. But like you're literally starting with nothing, with no rules. There's a lot of money at stake. You're given a lot of money, a lot of responsibility. I mean, how did you take that from a corporate environment going into something like Rocket Internet?
It was surprising and it wasn't surprising, right? It was surprising because it's a startup, right? So, it was surprising because, it's just jarring in general to like be exposed to that kind of environment. But it wasn't surprising because, I mean, we did a lot of like deals with medium kind of enterprises back in my advisory days. And even medium-sized enterprises that have managed to scale to like, a couple million in revenue a year, like you'd be shocked to like how like elbow grease kind of those operations tend to be when you dig in.
Still very entrepreneurial.
When you're doing the due diligence and stuff. I mean, but it still is highly like, founder or CEO based, where they're talented people who've managed to build it up to a certain level. But it's still very much like the amount of times, like the most common one, without getting into specifics that I can always recall, is like just sensitive data being stored on like multiple USB sticks or like some like
yes. I mean, that could be for multiple reasons too, though. I don't know, people hiding stuff and
oh, for sure. I mean, like the things you uncover, like when you do like accounting due diligence, is like is pretty hardcore. But I mean, at the same time, it's like fascinating that. It really is like when you think startups today, you think about the tech world and things like that and venture-backed things. But I mean, startup is just a fancy word for like your own, like a new business, like someone building a business. And that's what these guys are, whether it's manufacturing or it's, I don't know, like, I mean, I've pretty much worked mostly with manufacturing, so that's what comes to mind. But like, they're all startup stories in one form or another, and they're just talented people who've managed to grow to a certain scale. And so that wasn't so surprising at Rocket. I guess what comes from a corporate job before that is what you should take away and then apply is, like you said, you're just kind of throwing random stuff at the wall, but it's like, how do you quickly processize that, if that's a word? How do you quickly make a process out of that so you can like do trial and error, see what sticks, and then serve to like improve what sticks? And I think coming from a corporate environment first, that's if you're remotely kind of good at the startup job you want to do next, is that, I mean, that's something you should bring, like being able to synthesize being able to like try things and then synthesize what works into doing those things that work better.
Like, well, I mean, you got to start with an idea. Maybe sometimes you spreadsheet it out, you game it out a bit, then you got to execute it, then see what the results are. You got to measure the results and you optimize from there, right? And keep improving. And I guess that's what I mean. So to give the context, right? The venture we're talking about for Rocket was very early. It was like 2012. It was Zalora. when it was first launched was Zalora Vietnam in this case. So I mean, I had been launching a few of them before, and then you joined the venture to I guess your job was to do you were hired. Well, actually, what were you hired for? What did they tell you when you first joined?
I was an entrepreneur in residence, and they wanted me to start with Zalora in Vietnam.
That's it. Nothing else.
Yeah, they were like, we just need people.
Yeah, that pretty much was the pitch, right? So
they're like, okay, you'll do procurement, you'll do buying, and I was like, okay, but like beforehand, it wasn't. No, they initially approached me to try Glossy Box, actually.
In Korea or where?
Yeah, in Korea, and
yeah.
I didn't really feel enthused about doing. I mean, the business was great. It just wasn't something I was so interested in. Like the front end part of that, like makeup. Yeah, it was a women's makeup
subscription. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, if you ask me now, I maybe I would have done it. Maybe I would do it because you learn quickly that it's really more about like the back end of things. But at the time, I was less enthused, and so then quickly there was another. They tried another. I think the Airbnb clone.
Wimdu.
They tried getting me onto Wimdu too. I was more open to that, but I think it became quickly clear that they wanted to do more like proper e-commerce, like retailing stuff. And they were like, all right, no, we got this project Zalora, you got to do this one. And I was more open to it then.
No, that's fair. I mean, yeah, it's and then you jumped into the buying job, which you had never done before.
No.
Which I guess for people who don't know about e-commerce, right? So you like, especially for fashion, what you do is you build up you got to get the catalog built, right? So you have to basically set up relationships with people who actually have the actual clothing, the products that you're looking for, onboard suppliers, right? And then
the vendors and the brands who supply. Yeah, exactly.
And that was your first challenge. And then I'm not
sure why that was what they wanted. I mean, I'm sure you remember they had a very talented and experienced guy kind of already on board in Pradeep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I guess since Pradeep was hired locally, they wanted someone at the rocket level to help kind of cultivate that more. And so, I guess the idea was to couple me with a more experienced guy so that we could really make a process out of the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about that structure? Do you think that was the right call? Do you think it makes sense? Do you apply similar kind of thinking to how you're building your startup today when you think about hiring people?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, firstly, it's like a weird, I think about this often because like, especially today, it's such a best practice where like, especially VCs love to say things like, you got to hire the best people in the world to like the experts, like the people who are smarter than you. And it's like, the people who are better than you, like, and it's like, they make it sound so easy, but that's not such an easy thing to do, right? Like you want the best, I don't know, fashion buyer in the world to work for your rinky-dink e-commerce. You're going to have to come up with something better than a value prop for like, we're building online shopping, like in ways no one's seen before. But I mean, having said that, it is true to a certain extent. You want people, in my experience at least, there's two kind of things you should be looking for that are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but can be either someone who's like really like an expert in what they're doing or like really good in what they're doing, great in what they're doing, and so that they can really supercharge what you've already kind of done in that domain. Or you want someone who's a general good all-aroundist kind of person, someone who's not the best, but they either are quick learners or they're super passionate about what you're doing and can make it work no matter what kind of challenge comes their way. And I mean, those are ideal qualities that you look for in hirings, I guess, in people you try to recruit for the startups you bring. But I mean, still, it's always so cliche. It's like everyone has to be like it seems like everyone has to be like the best resume in the world and things, and that makes sense. I mean, from a VC's perspective, that's what you want to see. But I mean, in practice, it's a lot harder than simply like you're not just going through LinkedIn and be like, show me every like Harvard trained fashion buyer that you can find, and and I'll just pitch them this glorious vision of like this crazy e-commerce. And I mean, it's experimentation, it's a little trial and error, and just like anything else in the startup.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of that, and the other side is that sometimes there's hidden gems which are nice surprises. You hire someone for something else, but you find out they're really amazing at something else. I mean, I guess the method you're talking to is very VC, but also very Rocket at the time too, right? Just looking for a brand name, hiring fast. But I mean, for Rocket, it had a purpose to an end. A VC, I don't know, maybe that's just signaling or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot more. It's not so black and white like you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously you want like home run hitters, AAA players, right, all the time,
Correct.
But that's not always the case. So you probably should really only hire when you need to hire. Firstly, like just do it your like bootstrapped shitty way as long as possible, as long as it works, as long as possible, and only when you know that you're at like some breaking point, you should try to bring someone else in to do it. But then like it's really what do you have to offer, right? What's your what's your value prop to the recruitee, and that's not that simple, right? It's a no-brainer that you want the best person, but can you get them? Or maybe at this point, it's better just to get someone who can get the job done right.
Well, here's a very interesting question that I had when I was launching Zalora Taiwan, and I was watching the two founders there. Like we were up till like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning every day, and I would just watch them fight like crazy about whether or not to just, with the small team we have now, which is like maybe 5-7 people, just execute or spend more time, which would take longer, to hire people, to get more people in and scale that way. So when do you know that you should just focus on execution versus focusing on hiring then?
I think a general way to answer that is just when you're completely out of your element, right? If it's something you just really can't do, then hire someone to do it. But having said that, I mean, Rocket is a weird kind of example to use, right? Because it's not like you're a bootstrap startup trying to do. You have cash. How much varies, obviously. Sorry.
Yeah. It depends on your skill out of the whole pie they raised for the venture, right? So
So I mean, I think that's kind of a weirder example. And like with Rocket, I think it's also different because you kind of already have the playbook. You know what you need to do.
Yeah,
so
correct.
Like if you knew that,
exactly.
hiring like a great experienced person is something that's worked in the past, and you have the capital to kind of bring in or poach someone who can bring that skill to you. I think that's part of the playbook, and that should be something you might be aiming to do to grow faster in the earlier part. But in a pure startup, like something you're starting yourself with very limited resources, like you don't have a VC backing you, you're using your personal savings or something. I do think that it's a best practice for the founder to try to establish those initial kind of ways to do things in the beginning.
Yeah. But I guess where that it might serve you later is that assuming you have a very strong product market fit and then you have raised to scale, then you might apply that advice you talked about where, if you have the resources, then you start looking for people, assuming, you don't have the expertise, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it applies at a different stage, possibly. Yeah.
Certainly, when there's more finesse needed, I think as a founder, I think in general you should be a generalist. I think that's not necessary. That's not a rule of thumb, but
of course,
a good, I would say, on the business. If you're like a business type founder, you should be more general all around, right?
Yeah.
But all founders should be, I think, to a certain extent, trying to be all around with your business. It's not meant to be pretty, I think, at this stage. You're just trying to find what works. And it's when you need the finesse, I think, is probably the best time to start looking externally for people who can bring that.
Yeah. So I guess, towards the end of your time there, you eventually decide to leave. What is your greatest takeaway then from Rocket?
I mean, it was a fantastic experience overall, right? Despite all any kind of like friction or like difficulty. And that's with all things.
Yeah.
I think ultimately you might have done more because you stayed longer than you did with other ventures. I ultimately touched, I guess, 3 ventures with them. Like we did Zalora, that offshot into Lazada and Office Fab. I think it was because we started first. They definitely like just
correct. They just wrote everything that we did. I mean, to be fair, we wrote off of like whatever they did in Europe was Zalando as well.
Yeah, sure.
So I mean, it's all coming from the epicenter. But yeah.
And so it was very interesting to kind of get that exposure to e-commerce, especially at that time, right? In Asia, it was such a particularly like Southeast Asia, was such a growing thing that was really new, right? I think what I learned, e-commerce is also like, I mean, you can say that about any specific category, but it's such a intense category. Like it's tech, but it's not really tech. Like the front, the window dressing is tech. It's a storefront, but behind that, it's very much like manually operations, logistics, like that part is it's hard to kind of want to I mean, for the e-commerce specialists, like hats off to them. It's such a crazy intense category.
For sure.
For me, I just felt like e-commerce was my entry point into tech startups, and I didn't want to doing e-commerce, and it was like it became very obvious, and I think a lot of Rocket founders and Rocket guys kind of realized that at the time, that the growing real need as tech-enabled businesses skyrocket is in SaaS.
Yeah, SaaS.
Software as a service. I saw that as well, and I kind of wanted to move more into that kind of field rather than just doing pure e-commerce. And that's kind of it was I had already, prior to Rocket, I had already applied to and been accepted to business school. I just kept putting it off for like 2 years.
Okay.
And
so you were just deferring. Okay.
Yeah, I deferred for like 2 years now. It was like business school or accounting masters, and ultimately business school seemed to be more of like a better all-around kind of career move, as I didn't want to stay in an accounting capacity in anything. And I had that to kind of fall back on, and decided Rocket. I think the interesting thing was it enabled me to work with a lot of Europeans, and it just made me more. I had lived in the US, I'd lived in Asia. Why not move over to Europe after, see what that's all about?
Yeah, so you basically already had your MBA set up at the school as a HEC, right?
Yeah. I did my MBA at HEC Paris.
Yeah, and then and it's you already applied before Rocket even, right? So I guess you're coming off this financial experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so you were of the mindset, and your reasons were more probably related around your mindset of the time when you were working in financial services, that you thought this would be a good career move, right?
That's an interesting. I forgot about that, but it's true. Like when I applied, it was a completely different mindset than when I actually ended up going. It's true.
But then why not defer further and continue with Rocket or do another venture? Why did you choose business school?
That's a good question. I just think the way it ended for me at Rocket was not. It was a great experience in retrospect, and I really liked it, and I really appreciated what I learned. It just didn't end so amicably for me. To be fair, in many parts, my own way of doing it. Like they offered for me to do more. They're like, just come to Singapore ventures, and we'll throw you into something. Like there were so many things in the region at that time. They were just like, just come into Singapore. We'll see what we can fit you else in. And I just didn't like the way that transition was doing on a human level. Yeah. And I kind of was like, no, like fuck you guys. I don't want to do this and like I was like, I'll just do my MBA. I had it. So it wasn't. I mean, I still spoke with Mark a few times Mark Samwer a few times afterwards. So it wasn't like it was like a terrible like exit. It was just more like I didn't agree with the way the transition, because when I left, it was transitioning into like another. Don had left. Don, who had started it, had left, and they were really trying to. I guess the strategy changed from being like each country holding their own to trying to be like much more. And I didn't agree with that, and it ultimately didn't end up happening that way, right? It ultimately did become still like a what do you call it? A compartmentalized, or a more what do you call it when they're like components?
Subsidiary?
No, like they're parts of a whole, but the parts can function on their own. Not in a company perspective. It was more like a you use this for hardware a lot, where parts can work on their own, or they can work as part of a bigger. But in any case, that's how it ended up happening, right? The main hubs kind of imploded, and then like the regional.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So there was a regional layer for a while, but then some markets just, I guess, for the targets and expectations could not keep up, so they closed some markets. And some markets were eventually sold off, which I guess either because of timing or market size, right? Some combination.
Yes, I mean, I think that was kind of the way it should have. I mean, whatever, they have their idea and blueprint of how to do things. So far, far be it. Don't let me tell them how to do like what they know how to do. Sorry.
So I was going to say they're definitely far more successful, in at least from a monetary perspective, at least, right? So
the way things played out was kind of in line with the way I had like foreseen it. Like it didn't seem like a sustainable strategy, and that we were forced to kind of do things from regional things that only was because they would scale better regionally, but not necessarily mean better
locally.
Yeah.
I mean, that was definitely the rocket method, I guess, where you would have this dynamic where, you initially have a lot of control, but then, eventually you see that control, and then you have to kind of fall in line. And then if you're not making the numbers in that strategy, you're going to be cut eventually, right? So.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like for us, we had decent numbers from, it was mostly because I still stand by it. We were much more fiscally conservative in many ways, forced like compared to some other markets that just went balls to the wall. Like we're gonna splurge on everything. I think the reason why the Vietnam one was able to at least kind of float by was like we weren't just burning the cash just to burn the cash completely.
Correct. Yes. Correct. And then, well, also your experience leaving is quite unique, because when I left, I only spoke to the regional CEO, but because I was more mature at the time. But how did you manage to actually get in touch with Mark Samwer, then the actual brother, one of the brothers?
I think because it was just really early on. They were more involved at that. I don't know what it's like today, but they were more involved at the time, and so I said,
knew you by name.
Yeah. Like I mean, I'm not saying I did like a fantastic job, but
of course,
we've scaled out buying pretty well in Vietnam. I mean, there's still a ton of things we did wrong that I think in retrospect could be done better, but we scaled it out pretty well. I had built out some of the earlier overseas procurement things as well that was happening. And so I just had to regularly interface with them a lot more because it wasn't just Vietnam. I was towards the end, I was in China a lot. I don't know if you remember, but I was in China.
You did China buys. I forgot about that.
There was no other team doing that at the time. So they were really trying to figure out like how to make that viable. It was just like pure rocket style. Once they saw something was connected, then they tried to bring in like all these other guys. Overcomplicating the entire process. But I mean, for that, I was interfacing with Mark very regularly. And so I think good parts of Rocket is like if you get parts right, you get rewarded accordingly.
Yeah,
And
true.
I think that was maybe some work cultures that doesn't work well, but that I can appreciate that kind of work culture. And
Yeah.
to me, Rocket really that was one of the good things of what they did at the time. I don't know what it's like today, but what they did at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, today's a little bit different. They're more traditional. They're closer to, they're still venture builder, but they give a lot more equity. Apparently, that's like the word on the street. So, and then I mean, it's more of a return. Like all these Rocket alumni, they can do it better than the Rocket Factory itself.
No, yeah.
So now they have to kind of focus more on what's been working for the past many decades. So it's kind of like, at least that's the conversations I've had with people still around in Rocket. So.
Funny side story. I went to Oktoberfest in Munich, Germany, a couple of years ago. I forget when, a few years back, and I bumped into Ali there with
that's where he lives apparently, right? So I think the Rocket's based in Berlin, but I think his house is, from what I heard, his house is in Munich. So
okay.
I'm not surprised you actually. I mean, it's a big city-ish still, but it's funny that you actually bumped into. Did he recognize you or?
I don't know if he actually So I bumped into him a few times since living in Europe.
That's so weird.
I went to the World Economic Forum in Davos a few times, not as like a big kind of
as a
participant or anything, more just like as an attendee. And I don't know if he actually remembers me, but he was like, yeah, hey, and we talked.
That's very him, I guess.
We talked a few startup stuff and investment stuff a few times. He really didn't like he's always searching for new things, right? And
of course,
so he was super open and gave me time for stuff like that. I know at the time, though, he really didn't like the fact that he was like, what are you doing? That sounds interesting. How can I help? Can I get in? But he really didn't like the fact that I was based in France.
Okay. He wanted you to be in Germany.
Well, no. I think it was just the more kind of super employee friendly labor laws make it harder to do Rocket style.
That's true. Yeah,
pump, and if
fire.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know what he feels. Because having said that, Rocket has a presence here and they do stuff here. But I think he and to be fair, doing a venture with an entity in France now, it's there are a lot of benefits, but at the same time, there's some bureaucratic challenges that make the venture model a bit more challenging.
Well, I guess Europe's very similar to Southeast Asia in the sense that each market is its own thing, it's its own customs, its own rules, it's its own game, right? So it's not like you could scale something easily across. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm guessing, but you can't easily scale something across Europe as you would the US or China, right?
I think it depends who you ask. It's certainly true. There's so many regional differences that present challenges. Superficially, the language, of course, is a big thing, but every country tries to maintain its own sense of sovereignty, so that makes certain things harder to do. But there are some real hardcore unionists, the EU unionists here, that are like, no, this is the advantage we need to leverage. There's a way to do it. So it really depends who you ask. Some people find that to be a challenge. Other people are like, no, it's like a market like the US or China where we can
I can just scale everything.
Or exactly. I don't know how true that is. Either or, but again, that kind of challenge, it really depends who you ask.
You just got to look at the proof of the pudding, whether it's just a sale to raise money or, how many companies have scaled as fast exponentially as you see in China or the US, right? Look at the results, I guess.
There's still, I see when I look at startup job postings and stuff, there still is kind of country manager sort of positions internally within the EU. So I don't know, in the US, you'd never see or would
country
you?
manager.
You would see.
You'd probably see what, state, city manager.
Yeah, you wouldn't see a state manager though. You'd see a city manager maybe.
What you probably get is regional managers of maybe a few states, few cities, right?
Assistant to the regional manager.
Basically. So anything worth mentioning in the MBA? Was it good? Was it a waste of time? Do you recommend it for people?
It's an interesting question, right? I know pure startup guys resent things like MBAs and things like that. You don't need to pay like so much money to learn about business and things. I think that's absolutely true. That's not a lie, and I think if that's the conception of an MBA, that's entirely false. And I think that you'd be surprised how many students do come in thinking like, oh, like my time here, 1 to 2 years here, I'm going to take courses on M&A and I'm going to be an M&A specialist. It's like
yeah.
Even the professor who teaches M&A like has no M&A experience, and like if you actually try to like understand beyond theory what he's talking about, it's clear the guy is only talking from like a textbook example rather than like what actually happens on the ground.
My favorite. My favorite is these days like people go MBA to get experience to start a startup now, which is a little bit backwards, right?
Yeah, the entrepreneurial kind of track thing is a bit it's a bit weird. There's a kind of an incongruity, I think, in that sense.
Yeah.
But my favorite example was like I think IBM had sponsored like a big data course one semester, and but it's really limited seating, right? And obviously. With the IBM name brand, like everyone wanted to do it. And I remember this one girl, she didn't get accepted because it was like application based. That's how limited it was. And she didn't get accepted. And I remember being like, my life is ruined. Like I won't be. I mean, it's 1 semester course on big data, which is like just generally like hardcore statistics. Like you should probably be studying statistics for like years, like not just like a couple months.
Correct.
Having said that, I mean, I think that's the kind of wrong mindset to enter an MBA. What an MBA does, I think, that's beneficial is if you use it correctly, if you leverage it correctly, is that it expands your network. Like that's basically, I think, the biggest plus to doing something at a reasonably prestigious school. Or I mean, to be fair, I think region to region too. If you, for example, are in one state and you just want to stay in that state, you're happy to stay in that state, but you just want better opportunities within that state. I think an MBA from like a local university there is a great stepping stone to doing that, right? Similar to like a more, I guess, global or broader level, that's what a more prestigious MBA kind of gets you. Like you're interacting with like presumably really smart, talented people from all over the world, and you're connecting with them. And I think the goal is to connect with them in ways that you can mutually benefit each other down the line somewhere. And I think that is, I mean, any good organization that you're a part of should, and I think people are doing that more and more now. Everyone's like, I'm X something, or I'm alum of this. I'm like, I'm connected to that. And it's the same with an MBA. It's not because you're thinking you'll be like some business guru after you take your course. If that's your reason for taking it, it's absolutely bullshit. Like that's not what happens there. What it is to connect with other people who are ambitious or talented that you wouldn't have had another opportunity to connect with in another capacity.
I mean, that's a pretty big premium, you could argue, right? Like we're talking, it's not cheap, right? And so, and I think you already pointed it out. People are kind of doing that already through, I mean, these days technology is a lot more available. Social media is more available. So you can make your own networks. You can make your own things, right? So, I don't know. Do you still feel your argument still holds up? Is there something more unique with that network specifically? But like, I feel if I put as much effort and work, I have a very valuable network too. As long as I'm creating and solving hard problems and creating value from solving hard problems, and you put a little bit of effort in maintaining it, you build a very valuable network yourself as well. So
absolutely, for sure. I think that's absolutely true with the internet. Even with education, right? You don't need to go to Harvard to be like if you want to study statistics, you can study statistics now online, like YouTube. Yeah. I was following I forget who it was. It's just some guy doing math problems, like arithmetic up to like algebra 2 on YouTube. And he explained it really well. There, I was like, I found myself watching it for like a couple hours. I was like, oh wow, it refreshes me on all the stuff I had to learn during high school, and like you could really just pick up all that if you're just looking to be a master of the concept or something. Not even a master, just want to learn the concepts. You don't need to go to somewhere prestigious to do that. The value is more in the network, and like you said, then that network can be replaced with like an online network now with like on Twitter alone. I mean, I'm not a Twitter expert, but like clearly there are many sub communities in the grand
for sure.
in the grand world of Twitter that's also divided into like their own sub communities, right? Like for crypto, for example, crypto Twitter is like big. It's the place where most people interact, and same with tech Twitter, startup Twitter, VC Twitter, things like that. And I'm sure for things I'm not even interested in, there's Twitters for that, like film Twitter, baking Twitter. Maybe there's a baking Twitter. I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But going to an MBA is, I mean, you're putting money down for. It's kind of like a supercharging of that, right? Like you said, if you wanted to do it the proof of work way, like you have to add value, you have to put in your time, you have to grow in your community. An MBA is kind of like a pre-seed injection to that, I guess. It's like, all right, let's turbocharge this networking, and like I'm paying to go into this supposedly great pool of talent that will it will emerge business partners, it will emerge like colleagues, co-founders, maybe even like significant others, things like that. Like
so would you say then, based off what you're saying, would you say it's a luxury product then?
I think a prestigious MBA, like a Harvard MBA, Stanford MBA, HEC Paris MBA, like you're kind of right. It is kind of it can be kind of considered as a sort of like luxury good, a luxury product. That's kind of an interesting way to put it.
Something to think about at least. Well, anyway, for you, it's in the past, and you have the network, so it's already made the investment.
I mean, for example, like I can just expound a little bit more on that. Like, I didn't know anyone in France before coming here, and
that's fair. Yeah,
absolutely no network. And then France, for I don't know if I speak for French people. Maybe someone will be like, "No, not really." But France, shockingly to me, to learn it's a very hierarchical kind of country. Like they like labels and they like prestige and things like that. And so people normally, or like if you try to like connect with people or things like that, they'd be like, "Who are you? Like why connect with me?" But you associate yourself with the school if it's a good school, like that. Honestly speaking, it's opened a lot of doors for things to do with having that kind of next to my name, like when I try to access those sort of opportunities.
So to be fair, there are specific hard use cases that have value to it. You just have to have that mindset, and you have to know what it is to take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly, sure. I mean, it's same with like startups and VCs in the Bay Area, right? It's like if you're a talented guy, maybe you'll get some time. You graduated from Stanford, yeah, sure. Let's take 15 minutes for a coffee, like at least. I'm not saying just because you went to Stanford you'll succeed, but it's like that's
people give you time.
Yeah, that's already a badge to say like, all right, you can at least swing by and let's talk.
Yeah, that's what I heard about my friends who've been spending time in the Valley recently. A lot of Americans based in Asia for almost 10 years, like me. Because of COVID, they had to go back, right? So, but then, they're starting to spend time back in the Valley and interact. And what they told me is that surprisingly, the most prestigious person will probably give you time as long as you're not wasting it, right? If you have something to say and something to give and value, like they will, like you probably get the ear of someone for at least 5 to 15 minutes at least, right? So, I mean, that's one of the nice things about the Valley, at least. And I think by force of nature, by function, because of so much FOMO and so much deals they missed out, I think they have to listen to, as many people if it sounds somewhat legit, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. And so like you finished your MBA, then why did you decided to go back right into venture? You started a company called Control P. Like what was going on? What happened with Control P? What was the lessons? Like why not just join corporate, make money, or why be a poor entrepreneur again?
That's true. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, after Rocket, there was sort of an innate kind of desire to
Mm.
try to build something again.
Yeah.
Try to build something. I mean, honestly speaking, it was becoming more fashionable to be. I think,
Yes.
like with like
Yes.
the Social Network and things like the movie, everyone was like,
Yeah.
"Wow, like anyone can be a founder, and like anyone can just grow a business on the internet." So, like, I mean, there's all sorts of kind of allures like that. And mostly just also because it was I mean, there were tech ventures and successful tech businesses built out of France before, but just the startup scene in general was starting to grow suddenly really quickly. And so it was an exciting opportunity to try to stay in France. And whereas like you could go back to the States and try to be one of the thousands of guys in the Bay Area trying to build something. Instead, you could be one of the hundreds of guys in Paris trying to build, in France trying to build
Fair
something.
enough.
It was a smaller pool, and I think like my skill sets at the early stage were something I wanted to kind of test more in different capacities. And so, it was an interesting time to try to stay. There were a lot of initiatives to try to attract foreign talent at the time to stay, and that's what I wanted to leverage to stay here. It was my first foray into. I did my MBA internship at a SaaS company, a travel tech company called Amadeus, and it just reminded me that. It wasn't as fun to be in like a large environment. It was a great experience. I love the opportunity. It's like for travel tech, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like the Google of travel tech or something. It's a huge company and great campus, great people, really fun. But it just reminded me that you're just one person in like hundreds, thousands, and like it was really hard to get stuff pushed through. And so I did have an interest in SaaS. I saw an opportunity to try to test a few things I saw in Asia that might work in Europe, because Europe, I mean, today it's pretty tech with the smartphone and everything. Everyone's got apps, everyone's doing stuff. But I guess my recollection now is it wasn't like that as much back then. A lot of especially in France, still a lot of things on paper.
Old world still.
Yeah, it's very bureaucratic, very, I don't know if I ever told you this, but like living in France really gave me better insight to some of the friction and challenges I experienced in Vietnam, like regarding bureaucracy and things like that.
What the French brought, they brought everything, the good and the bad.
I feel like I was like, I recognize this. Why do I feel like I've experienced this before? It's like, oh man, it's just kind of like Vietnam, where like, you got to go from person A to B. You got to get some kind of stamp. Then you got to take that stamp to something. And it's like, this place is like the birthplace, the genesis of all of that. And so it's such a paper intensive country. And so I was like, and cloud printing was still kind of like growing at the time. It wasn't like what it was today, what it is today. And although I recently saw that Google decided to shutter its cloud print division product for some reason. So maybe there's an opportunity again. There was a bit of a hole now. But they're just really, for being such a print intensive country, there's no kind of culture of like a FedEx or Kinko's here. There's like small copy shops, but then it's like the experience varies from place to place. The idea was to kind of build a print as a service kind of product where it was like a combination of things I saw working in Japan and Korea, where people kind of decentralized the printing process and kind of let everyone use their spare printing capacity to do printing stuff for you.
Oh, interesting. I see.
And so, I was able to get a small round on that, like a small pre-seed round, a couple tens of thousands to build up that, and did a product around that. started at the school, which was easy to get access to because there was no kind of badge system at the school at the time. Like even when I was in university back in the mid 2000s, like we already had a badge system for printing and everything. But in the French school system, I mean, it's obvious why. I mean, the American education system is so much more expensive, like cost intensive, and so like you have all that infrastructure here. It's much cheaper, and so they don't care as much about they don't spend as much time on the infrastructure. Yeah. And so they were still doing things manually on USB sticks from a single computer in like a printing lab where everyone was like backed up. So I was like, okay, this is a good place to start. And we set up 2 printers there. And then we found some traction with like hotels, like their business centers. Like, but it was just, I did that for like a year. And we were in like maybe 10 locations in Paris, outside of the schools. And, but it was just hard to raise another round after that. Like even just like on notes or something, like nothing like a bigger seed round, but like just the investors, here are more conservative, more, they want to see traction, which makes sense, right? It's not that traction is wrong, but it's like, to raise like a pre-seed or a seed here is like the kind of traction you would see on a Series A kind of investment.
Oh wow! Okay,
it's like you want a fully functioning business. It's like who doesn't? You know, like they're like, give me a 5-year projection. Like, show me where your sales is going to be. Like, what's like the definitive business model? How are you going to like scale year to year? And it's like, well, man, like with the kind of traction you want, like you should be able to justify going to a bank and getting like a small business loan. Like why even go the venture capital route? And I think that is something that's still kind of weaker in. I can't speak for all of Europe, but France compared to like, for example, the US, like at the early stage, there's still a big gap in like Series A and beyond. There's some great funds that have helped scale some cool companies. But like the smaller stage, the earlier stage, there's still a gap. And either you're going to be like an amazing founder that's super talented, or you've got some advantages that like people that like normal people would not have, or like what we've done subsequently with the startups I worked on, we just raised in the U.S.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that means that they get it better. But I mean, I guess there's got to be a disconnect of them understanding the European market, or they don't care, or they just see you as a founder.
I think it depends on what you're working on, right? Like,
that's true.
Obviously, if you're like, I'm building like an online shoe retailer in France, some Bay Area guy is going to be like, what do I care? Like that's not something that works. But if you're working on something a little bit more broad, global, not necessarily geography specific, more investors are open to not just now, it's been increasingly the case where more, I think, investors are open to investing outside, geographically, at least outside the U.S. So some cases where it's like, at least incorporate your company in the U.S. And we'll fund you that way. But I've seen more and more investors open to just straight up funding French entities.
I mean, I would suspect, and this is my guess only, I'm not really deep in the VC space, but I imagine there's just too much money chasing not enough deals. People getting squeezed out of US, chasing alpha, chasing deals. It's the same effect you see in China. A lot of hyper aggressive Chinese entrepreneurs and investors, a lot of them have to look for SEA. They expect the kind of same results. Of course, it's a little bit different, but it's because things are just very, I think the pool has gotten so much bigger in terms of money and investors. So there's a lot more noise as well. And there's also less really good deals to chase. So I guess it leads to a trend of people looking outside to other countries and more founders broadly. And surprisingly, Americans are shocked. Oh, there's a lot of great people outside of US.
Yeah. I mean, I say this, but like ultimately it's a return business, right? It's a return-based business. So like, obviously I say it facetiously, but it's not weird for someone to want more proof of traction. That's not not necessarily the problem.
It's actually more the norm. It's good business.
Exactly. I guess I think, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard a French VC like defend himself by saying, well, like on average, our funds here as a whole make better returns versus like US based funds, where it's like we're happy with our 3x, 4x kind of average returns, whereas like in the US, I don't know how true this is. Again, I've never compared it myself. So like you'll get the super home run guys like Sequoia or something that are like, getting a 10x or whatever. And then you'll get guys who are like a 1.5x or 2x maybe because nothing's popped in their portfolio. Maybe that's the case, but I guess that's the difference in mentality. Like some people just want to swing for the fences and get that home run. Other people are happy batting singles and getting RBIs,
Well, I mean, it depends on the nature of your fund size and who your LP is.
Sure. Sure.
The larger your fund gets, you need to get unicorns. You're not going to return any money on a 3x if you have to, get, a portion of $1 billion. And 3x is not going to cover your billion that you took from your LP, right? So
if you've got many LPs or something like more and more funds have, and I guess it's just also what irks me is like you try to use the VC moniker. I mean, at that point, you're just like
you're not exactly
you're a PEF or something. You're a private equity guy, and which is fine. Exactly. That's not a problem. But like,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Just don't try to wear the clothes of a VC guy and just like talk like a VC guy and be like, we love founders. Like, no, like. That's a different ballgame. That's a different story. And I think, whatever, at the end of the day, as a founder, your fundamentals need to be right in order to continue down your path. But at the same time, I do think there could be more benefit from better early stage infrastructure here.
Yeah. So then what happened with Controlled P? Profitable, didn't make it, no traction. Then you just decided to form Quidli, or how did that work?
No, it wasn't going the way I wanted in terms of both traction and financing. Like we were building users, we were getting more prints. That was one of our metrics, like every 1,000 prints, things like that. But certainly not enough to justify the business model we were using was you could print for free, but we put ads on each on the pages, and so we sold ads, but it just not nearly at the pace we wanted. And so after about a year and a half, we're like, well, we tried. We got it. It's not like we died out of the gate. We were able to scale. We just couldn't get the funding we wanted, and we weren't able to like bootstrap more. And my co-founder had lost interest by the time. And so it was time to, cut your losses. That's, something every founder deals with at some point, right? Whether you want.
So it sounds like you guys were chasing an idea. It wasn't necessarily a real pain point that you loved or were passionate about. And I guess it came to a crossroads where it became challenging, taking more pain. And because of the foundation, maybe it was just better to move on.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I would say I would want to defend myself and saying I did become pretty passionate on printers for a bit. Like I was looking at the thinness of the paper. Like how could you stock more? Like grams? If you could get even thinner sheets and stuff like that. But no, I think overall that's a fair approximation. That business school network pays off, right? I was able to talk with a friend in PE/VC who had a portfolio company that needed someone to help with. The company was interested in doing cross-border M&A, like international acquisitions. And so, a classmate found me a job in a French ed tech company that been around for a bit, and they were looking to raise more money. In order to do that, they wanted to make some acquisitions to look more kind of robust, more international. Okay. And so, I was with the French ed tech company for a bit, helping them identify international targets to acquire. And they ultimately acquired one of them.
Nice.
in Spain, which was cool. So that was actually a very fun gig. Basically, I was paid to identify companies and travel to the different countries to meet with these companies, get an idea of their situation, get ideas of their financial snapshots, and the goal was to help the company expand. Very cool. Very French. It was like my first time 100% French environment, which was interesting. But I had another school classmate who from the MBA who had been we'd been very close during during the MBA. We had even looked into crypto together. We did a project on Bitcoin. This is back in 2013.
So, during school.
So
this is before the really big wave of the Bitcoin
really big
rising.
wave, yes. But to be fair, at 2013, it was already quite big. I think if I recall correctly, it was already $800 at that point.
Well, compared to where we are now, and even at the first peak, right? I mean, it's still nothing.
I mean, the fact that it even got up to $800 is amazing to me.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, I mean, we were super close on that. We did a project on that. We'd always been interested in doing startups together, and he came from an engineer background. I came from like doing the business stuff, startup stuff before, and we really, on personal levels, felt like we clicked. So we stayed in touch. I did my startup. He did his own startup, which ultimately became a YC company, and he built it up to a seed level. They closed their seed, and then he left.
What happened?
I think he according to him, I don't know the internals, but like it was, at least his description to me was quite admirable. He realized he wasn't skilled enough to go past that. Like he built it up to that point, but he was the CTO for this company, and the way he explained it was everyone they subsequently hired after was much more talented than him, and like he was not as like necessary anymore, and he felt like he was more of a barrier, and so he wanted to do an early stage thing again. And he was like, "Have you been checking out crypto these days? Remember Bitcoin?" And we like we looked, and it's crazy. At that point was the crazy peak time. It hit the 20K plus. All-time high, and then like all the other kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with the ICOs.
Like, of course. At the time, that was the craze.
Yeah, the token sales and like all the ventures being built on the back of that were like, fuck VCs. We don't need VC anymore. We're just going to do token sales, and like, and this will be the way to build businesses in the future. And so. During the MBA, we took like entrepreneur stuff together, and there was like a big dynamic on like how like the professor there like spent a lot of time focusing on like the foundings of the company itself in terms of like ownership and things like that, structure. And so it was a big topic that he emphasized, and something that we spent a lot of time ourselves kind of like, what's the best way to do like ownership in a company? It's so easy to just be like, for like a layman, it's like, oh, I came up with the idea. I own 100% of the company. Maybe you help me build it. I'll give you 5% or something. And it's like, it's so arbitrary. Like people will try to give you best practices. Like,
correct.
Like if you're a founder, you need to make sure, or like at least all the founders own like whatever percentage that's ideal. And then like, then you need to be careful about how you distribute like afterwards. And it's like, all that is arbitrary if your company ends up not amounting to anything. You create like additional stress on yourself and resentment and tensions for something that in at least that exact moment means nothing. Like to really reap the rewards of something you build, it's much later on, right? And I mean, we saw tokens and blockchain as a way to kind of create more equitable structures or equitable like ways of distribution that would make that. I mean, you were seeing that with the tokens itself, like with Bitcoin, like the way it was being given out. Ultimately, the people who held on to it, like the strong believers or the lucky guys who just forgot about it, they get rewarded. They get compensated for their beliefs, and that's kind of how shares are at its core, right? Like it's the people that added value and were lucky enough or confident enough to hold on to that value that end up getting rewarded. And we saw parallels to that with tokenization and blockchain, and decided to try to build a company. Yeah, exactly. Build a product around that from a not just a token perspective, but from a real legal perspective, like adding a legal layer to that would create equity on a.
So are you talking smart contracts then, or?
You mean the legal layer?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to get into the weeds a little bit, I don't want to get in too much, but I mean, a smart contract is basically the token and how you operate things on a blockchain network like Ethereum, not Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts, but a smart contract itself is not necessarily like a contract in like the legal framework sense. It's more how you build programmability on a blockchain. Like the smart contracts are how you do like if then kind of things and build interactions and transactions on a smart contract based blockchain like Ethereum. The legal, when we say legal layer, we mean like actual legal contract, like paper, not paper, but like the legal kind of documentation that actually gives someone some form of right or claim to something. So yeah, it does get kind of confusing when you get smart contract, normal contract thing, but not the same at all. We're putting a contract on a smart contract.
Yeah. So the main issue with that I guess, because you're also when you're founding basically the beginning of Quidli, this was your initial hypothesis of how you would like to probably approach the space and solve a problem and create a product, right? But I think that was very early on, because I think one of the biggest problems today is tying the physical world to the actual blockchain, right? Like I think you're dealing with regulators at that point, and then you're talking about people actually buying in, believing it, and people actually adopting it, right? So, I mean, did you have ideas around how to solve that, or were you just too early and maybe overly optimistic?
No, that's a good question. I would say a combination of a lot of things. I think we are still early in terms of tokens and blockchain in general. Excuse me, digital currency, cryptocurrency, things like that. But having said that, in a general sense, I think it really does have a value proposition, and it really does have problems. It's not just like it's not like ICO times where it's like just slap a blockchain on it. It's like let's run a hotel on top of like blockchain technology, because like you can have like full transparency on on either who owns it or who's allowed to be a guest or some shit like that.
Correct.
That kind of stuff I think is BS. But like, I mean, just in terms of like digital currency in general, like it totally makes sense to have a distributed ledger that's managing like the distribution and transactions of financial transactions. Like more and more transactions are done online or done digitally, not done with like legal tender, like physical legal tender that's being done. It makes sense to try to transition into a more digital economy, to more kind of.
Why? Because it's more efficient,
more efficient,
more cost wise.
Yeah, cost wise, security wise. I mean, you get into different philosophical arguments. If you take a decentralized approach, it's like it's your money and you should be able to do whatever the hell you want with it. Like no one should be able to censor your money, quote unquote. You can also
impossible.
I mean, technically today with Bitcoin, that's already the case. It's just a matter of who accepts it.
Just the regulators won't allow it, though, I think.
At a regulation level, yes, but at a P2P level,
of course, it's literally possible.
It's literally possible. You're right. But even from a centralized approach, even if you don't take a decentralized approach, it makes sense because we more and more are living in a global world. Sometimes the financial system internationally is highly impeded, and it disadvantages people from like less developed regions, just to do like simple wire transfers or bank transfers, just to hold money. And creating like a digital space for that is significantly more efficient, significantly more. I hate to be cliche because it's something that a lot of crypto people say and still not realized, but there needs to be a way to bank the good proportion of the world that's not banked, like the unbanked.
Okay. So why blockchain versus other older technology that's already working?
Just because of the fact that there should be transparency and better accountability for money. Like if you're just using like a normal database, a normal like MySQL or a Postgres database, like that can be redundant, or that can be like you can just fuck with that immediately. You can like you can easily manipulate that kind of stuff. But if you're doing it on a distributed basis, whether it's a completely decentralized distributed basis or a more controlled like internal node distributed basis, it's harder to create like I don't know, like what do you call it, fraud. It's harder to do fraud, things like that. And so it makes sense. It totally makes sense from simply not even crypto, simply from a currency point of view, to start applying blockchain technology towards monies. I think I definitely became very attuned to the pains from living abroad for so long. I've been outside of the States since 2007. So like more than 10 years, and now approaching 13, 14 years. And it's probably the single biggest pain I've experienced, like moving assets from one region to another.
That's true. That's
true. From different financial systems to another, from different banks to another. And I've never experienced something as frictionless as crypto in that sense, like where I can make those transactions without having to worry about like, is my bank going to let me do it? Is the other bank going to recognize my transaction? Like, will I get
That's a good point.
How many intermediary fees am I going to have to pay to do like, maybe it's a different currency to a different currency? Like, there's a ton of, for the speed at which we live in this globalized world today, there's a ton of inefficiencies in how we let our money be managed and distributed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point because I never thought of it in that kind of context. That is a huge pain point I have. And I guess that ties to a very hard, tangible value that people could reap benefits from. But at the same time, I guess it's tied to the older institutions and frictions that exist purely by the complexities of the systems, the laws, the politics, the inherent dangers for consumers, like the nefarious agents playing it also in the same systems, from like illegal money, gray market money laundering, right? So, I mean, I guess there's reasons why they exist. And so I guess it's all good idea with, philosophy and ideas of what you're saying. It's true, no doubt. But then, where does the intersect meet of tangibility and feasibility? And then it starts becoming more mainstream.
I think, honestly speaking, that's still something that's being figured out, right? I don't know if crypto people like to hear things like that, but I think it's still something being figured out. But I mean, everything you said before, I think it's true. It holds water, but at the same time, that exists whether with or without crypto. Like that exists with the system today. That exists with currency today. That exists with money today. I think one thing that crypto people like to point out, I think rightfully, it's hilarious. Everyone's like, "Oh, Bitcoin, it's for like drugs and illegal deeds." Like there was the crazy Silk Road story where like the founder purportedly tried to hire an assassin to kill somebody using Bitcoin. It's like, that sucks. That's terrible. But like, that also happens with actual, like real, like fiat currencies, like dollars, things like that. Like you're not stopping it or making it any less plausible by denying crypto. I think there's a lot more advantages from the money perspective. I'm talking about. There's a lot of other things you can do with a blockchain database, but like, purely from a money perspective, there's a lot of things you can benefit from using crypto networks.
And I guess that's the perfect segue because you had this initial idea of, I guess, more transparent equity for founders and companies on a blockchain, which I guess you tested out probably an MVP, but eventually you kind of pivoted that away into what Quidli is now today, right? So kind of what happened and what is Quidli now?
Yeah, so we started doing like equity and blockchain stuff, equity on blockchain stuff, and I think it was like you mentioned earlier, like why did we pivot? Like, was it just like timing? I think it's a variety of a lot of stuff, timing included, maybe also the implementation, like our own way of going about it. To me, it's not a question of if it will work; it's more when. Because I think whether we do it or not. Sorry?
Are you a true believer then? Does this mean like for the rest of your life you're only going to be dedicated to blockchain and because you know it's going to happen?
I mean more like putting like assets and securities on like a distributed ledger basis. I think that's something that will
just timing.
Yeah, it will happen. There's no reason for it not to happen. It's absolutely kind of ludicrous that it's still done like on a pen and paper way when it can be more digital. And when it needs to be digital, there needs to be more transparency and accountability. So like it's a great tool for doing that. I don't want to go as far as to say it's the perfect tool, but it is a logical next extension of a tool for managing things like that. There were various kind of frictions in terms of like the product we built and the users we worked with. We used it ourselves. You can still check out. We have our database up and with an interface for people to publicly take a look at how we distributed equity and how we used the tool. But what we found were like a few examples of why we stopped was one. There was just too much user friction for people to use blockchain-based tools because to access like the blockchain, like you can't. It's not just like connecting to like an AWS kind of system or something. Like you need to actually be able to engage with the cryptography, and so you need different like extensions and tools into your browser that will give you that access. And it just wasn't like
I see the infrastructure's not there yet, basically.
Yes and no. It is there, but too much. Too little for like mainstream use, I would say.
Why not? Why not just build the infrastructure then?
I think that's a great comment. I think that was an option for us to take. That's something we vigorously debated internally. We could have continued to be an infrastructure company, I think. And I think the guys who stayed in that space, that's essentially what they're doing now, kind of pioneering and waiting for like that tipping point. I think that's a viable strategy and something that we could have done. I think we ultimately... Sorry?
Yeah, so I said the previous episode before this one was with the CoinGecko founder. So I think that's
you did talk to them?
Yeah, so it's going to be a few weeks till I launch it because I'm like backlogged like crazy. But it was a very good episode, and that's the perfect example of infrastructure and timing. Like, it was just like they just it was a side project, and whenever Bitcoin took off, then it became like really serious. Then they started full time. Then it dropped again, but then like now it's back up again, right? So.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like you said, it's a valid strategy,
It's a great story. Those guys, like, I'm sure. I don't know their internals. I don't know what's going on, but like, a reason I use CoinGecko regularly now, and like, one of the big, at least the way I saw the story was like, I didn't give a shit about CoinGecko. There was already a leading solution,
CoinMarketplace,
CoinMarketCap, and and it's great. I mean. To nuts and bolts, it's the exact same thing as CoinGecko, but like suddenly it was that guy ended up getting acquired by one of the largest crypto companies in the damn man, you're like an expert now in this field.
I know a little bit.
And suddenly that's that what do you call it? The ethics were kind of called into question. If the largest exchange,
the Chinese company bought it, people don't trust them.
And
data,
God, suddenly CoinGecko it's not that it was like the best. I mean, I'm not slagging on those guys. I'm just generally speaking, it's not the best user experience. It's not something that it does uniquely better than the other. It's just really positioned well suddenly to be like, look, we're not affiliated with this giant Chinese marketplace. Like we're giving you like really independent information. Yeah. And sure enough, CoinGecko is one of my browser tabs now. I don't go to CoinMarketCap anymore.
I mean, and when I did talk to him from day one, they're never going to compromise that value or that virtue about the company. So that's always like paramount with the transparency issue. I mean, of course, I don't know. Who knows when the money appears?
CoinMarketCap got acquired for like a couple $100 million, I think.
I think it was like 400 million.
It wasn't a small deal.
Correct. Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe if someone offers them talk to them again after someone.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's fair. But also to be fair, one of my friends, which I think actually next week he's going to be on as a guest. He's a crypto trader, so he spends half his time as a crypto trader.
Nice.
The other half, he's a CTO for a SaaS company, but he uses CoinGecko because of the APIs are very good for building his own dashboards and customizing. And he said specifically he chose that over CoinMarketCap, aside from the dodgy acquisition that he doesn't like as well. Of course, everyone doesn't trust the Chinese for some reason.
We're about
but that's
stuff on our side.
Very nice. Yeah. Okay, so what is the quick elevator pitch of Quidli now? So what did it eventually become? And then why should we use it?
So, quick elevator pitch is it's basically it's a shared crypto wallet that you can use for groups, and we position it for remote teams who can then use it to do international transfers of value quickly, efficiently, cheaply. We position it as perks, incentives. But I mean,
I see. Okay, yeah. But that's the main use case first for now, and the main niche you're focusing on.
That's where we found the most success. Like, there's two points where we found traction today is with remote teams. And for, I think we see it for because some of them we can't connect with directly. We reach out, we don't connect. But I suspect some of them are just personal accounts as well. They have very little sub wallets, team member wallets, and they're just buying and holding and doing stuff. And
So basically, it's a Bitcoin. Sorry, it's a cryptocurrency wallet that you could use to basically put. You could transfer real fiat money into crypto coins, a currency of your choice, and then you could. The main use case that you're seeing now is people are actually paying remote workers in these coins.
Yeah. When we initially started, we didn't have any of that kind of verbiage. We were just like, all right, we had this hosted wallet system from our equity platform. The biggest thing that people were doing, we know and we feel passionately that compensation for employees is something that's always really poorly done. It needs to be something that's improved. Yeah. And whenever we mentioned we were a blockchain-based solution, people are like, "Oh, like Bitcoin? I'd love to get some Bitcoin." Things like that. People are always looking for ways to earn more Bitcoin, and we were like, "Screw it! Let's just swap out the equity tokens and just put in Bitcoin. Let's see what happens." And we launched it. We shared it on a few sites, and we noticed that people were like, "Oh, I have a remote company, or I have a freelancer I work with, and I hate paying these crazy intermediary fees just to give them a few hundred or a few thousand. I'll use this to pay them in Bitcoin." And so slowly we saw that there's a real hard value proposition in terms of doing smaller kind of micro transactions of value to people in different areas, and where it doesn't need to be localized. And we started adding we then went beyond Bitcoin. We started adding Ethereum-based tokens, stable coins, ones that are fixed to dollars. And we see that more and more people are realizing that kind of pain today. I mean, you see, coincidentally, this past week, you saw both Stripe and I don't know if you know Mercury. It's an online challenger bank in the U.S. for businesses.
Okay.
And more and more people want to manage their money the way they want to manage their money, not the way banks want them to manage their money. And that was kind of a similar case with people doing international transactions to their team members. It's we could use these existing solutions like Western Union or PayPal, or even I really like TransferWise and even TransferWise, but there's still so much.
I have a terrible experience with them. I can't get approved. My KYC. I literally take perfect pictures and they still won't approve it for some reason. So I gave up. Yeah, TransferWise.
Wow. It's the one
Yeah, so
I never feel bad. I never feel bad talking about PayPal because like there's like this
yeah.
giant machine that really does not care about you. TransferWise, personal experiences have always been really good with it, but there's
Okay.
still like friction points because it's like all fintech today, right? The problem is
Yeah.
when you do it on top of legacy financial tools, you just can't avoid the sort of limitations that the bank set on you already. Whereas with like crypto networks, it's entirely new. It's entirely being built from scratch, built for like the digital economy. So you are really leveraging the efficiencies of these kind of networks to kind of do the transaction services faster, more efficient, more like same day as opposed to even TransferWise, like best case scenario, maybe 2 days, worst case scenario, like a week.
Yeah. Which is quite long.
Yeah, and so we saw that traction building, and so we changed the positioning to like remote teams, and we're just building that up right now.
Yeah, and I could definitely attest to it because the reason why we reconnected was you wanted me to help test the actual payments, right? So, and it's very easy. So you just put your credit card in, and then I literally was holding Bitcoin like a second later, right? And so I felt that's quite a very good proposition. So the thing is, you can get money into your wallet, and you're holding crypto. Can I get it back in fiat somehow?
Through us, no. At the moment, we don't offer that, but it's your crypto. You can take it off to an exchange if you want. And
so I would need to go to exchange.
Yeah.
So that depends on.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
For us to convert it into money back again would pose a few challenges that we're not ready to face right now. However, we do offer ways for you to use it directly integrated into the application. Like we have an e-commerce integration where you can swap your Bitcoin for like credit or gift cards from like a bunch of brands and vendors across the world. Like you can get an Amazon gift card, you can get an Airbnb credit, you can get like DoorDash points, blah blah blah.
I feel
or you can just hold it.
Yeah, if you could scale the use cases, I would feel very comfortable uploading a lot more money into the actual Bitcoin and using it as a way to transfer money from country to country instead, right? Because I see your point. You can't you need a license to get an exchange, and then you have to set up follow the protocol, do KYC. It's a lot of infrastructure and tech to build. Which I guess there's so many exchanges. Like CoinGecko has over 400 exchanges already listed, I think, right? So,
what's cool is you can send it to someone without even a bank account necessary, right? Like if you wanted to give someone $20, you can send it to them. And
that's what you did to me the other day.
And I think when you bought it, you bought some Bitcoin. You must be at least double by now. You didn't buy that. You're not like a.
I didn't buy much though, but it exploded after that test though. Yeah, I got lucky.
It's retirement money, but but at the same time, like it's like if you're into that kind of thing, the speculation is great, and it's a growing asset that's becoming more and more accepted by financial institutions. If you're not into that kind of thing, just do it with a stable coin. Like it'll stay in the value.
It's tied to the dollar or something. Yeah.
And we have a ton of integrations that help you, like not all the currencies yet, but some of the currencies you leave parked in your wallet. We'll even help you accrue interest on it, like at rates that are better than most banks offer. I don't know how it's like in Asia these days, but in Europe and the US, like a savings account will only get you like less than 1%, like on top of like what's the incentive to hold your cash in these institutions? If, for example, in France, they even charge you to hold it, and your interest is not offsetting that at all. So I think there's like a ton of incentives to, at least if you're not all in, at least experiment with some of the crypto networks around today and see how you can better leverage this kind of growing alternative form of finance.
Yeah. Well, like what I'm really excited about and what I like what I'm hearing from you is that if you could reduce the frictions and you open up more doors of how I could use the actual crypto, man. Like I have way more incentive to keep uploading more, and then I'd be open to more speculation. Then you could build more infrastructure for more financial products on crypto, right? So, I mean, I think it's a pretty exciting future that I had no clue about before talking to you, and then getting more into talking to people around. So I think it's very positive. And what's interesting is that you kind of pivoted, and then somewhere along the story you raised money too as for this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I'm speaking frankly, I think it's one of those kind of like, there's always, everyone wants like a surefire kind of, when you invest, you want something that seems surefire, right? You want something that's traction based. But at the same time, there's always like trends, there's always fads. And so I would say the first check we got was definitely more driven by like the fad of blockchain.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the first investor we had was a blockchain venture studio. Like their
venture studio for blockchain.
Yeah.
Okay, based in Europe, right?
No. Well, I think that company is actually incorporated in Switzerland, but their operations are mostly out of the U.S. Like they're based in New York.
Would be the consensus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're a big institutional in the world of Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain.
I see.
The founder is one of the founders of the Ethereum blockchain, and they're all very super committed to building out that ecosystem, building out the sort of infrastructure necessary to kind of do more things mainstream on blockchain. We through their Tachyon accelerator, which was a great experience. If I can plug them here, I guess we were able to get our first check. Great team, great vibe for blockchain projects that are looking to kind of get off the ground. And then we hooked up with SOSV and Emergo. SOSV is a more traditional investor
right?
Through their accelerators, and Emergo is another blockchain studio, not Ethereum based, on the Cardano blockchain, and they've been very good supporters of kind of the mission of just the overall mission of like improving transactions that focus on compensation, that focus on incentivization, things that help kind of workers. Oh, is the internet connection bad? Things that help.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
Things that help workers kind of, get value faster for the value they put in.
Okay. I mean, so it sounds like you had some really good partners. I mean, there's some pretty big names. And I guess mostly through the accelerator. So, but are you having continued relationships? Are they helping you actively, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. We're super always pleased with the team. I mean, SOSV is a very seasoned group of the VC accelerators, and the whole kind of model and the team is like, it's not just kind of come in for a couple months and like work in a fancy office space. It's more like those guys in particular are really like family. We talk with them every day. Good sounding boards, very good advice, always making themselves available to kind of help us test theses and build up our roadmaps. Emergo and Consensus as well. I mean, in the world of crypto and blockchain, it's still a very fragmented and kind of anonymous world. So it's very helpful to be tied to these like known entities, known quantities in this space that give us legitimacy. Because for the average, we're not, our product is not really geared towards hardcore crypto enthusiasts, right? We're not. It's not the type of product that's necessarily like, we don't need a bank. Like the banks are terrible. I would say it's more like, for a lot of people, it's like training wheels to get into crypto. How to kind of get more acquainted with the basic functions and parts, and I mean, they help us add a lot more legitimacy in that sense. Definitely.
And so I want to probably wrap up with the last question, I guess, and then you could give some plugs after that. So, what maybe for Quidli or maybe crypto broadly, either one. What is the biggest misconception that you think that needs to be addressed or solved around for the crypto space, blockchain space?
The biggest misconception, like something I think that people should know that they just don't. I mean, I think still a big barrier is like for average person, like if there is any association at all to cryptocurrencies, it's that it's like tied towards like that Silk Road kind of stuff of like drugs and illicit activities and things like that. And I mean, that's not to say that's not true. That certainly did happen. But at the same time, like that should not be the only association tied to crypto or blockchain. Like it should be, it should just be considered like something that did happen, but that's not as, I guess, family friendly, but at the same time, like certainly not the only use case. The other thing is, I think you really should think about your relationship with financial institutions. I said earlier, I'm not the banks must die kind of guy, but at the same time, like let's honestly think about, like, particularly in the 21st century, as we go more and more digital, like what are the services that our financial institutions are offering to us? Are they necessarily fair or as inclusive as they can be? Like, some would argue that it's about accessibility, that it's about, I mean, having a bank account is not at its core something you need to live, but to live in like a modern society, it's such an important part of like, of how you manage your finances, and that impacts how you live. And it seems like a lot of a bank has not changed since like it was introduced in like the mid, like I don't know, the mid like 16th century. So when was the first bank? Some Italian bank, I think, like back in like the 60s.
Way back then, even before that probably.
And what's really changed? It's still just some place that holds your money for a fee, and it's supposed to incentivize you ideally by, like, I don't know, either keeping your money safe or letting you earn interest on like what they hold. Yeah. And what's really changed since then? So I think that's something people should think about, their relationship, not in relationships necessarily that are about like, how do I get more rich? But it's like, how does my bank, how does my financial institution really help me? And I think that's something you can really reinvent a lot with crypto, like more than any other kind of fintech. Because like I said earlier, like a lot of fintech today is just putting lipstick on a pig, just because you have some like beautiful UI UX on top of, to make an app. It's still being run on the back end by legacy like banking systems. Correct. And so you're still kind of prisoner to that old kind of system. And whether you see that system as good or bad, it doesn't matter. We're in the 21st century. It needs to be digitized. It needs to be more efficient. And if that's the case, why not reinvent it in a way that's more inclusive? Like, give better interest rates to maybe someone that's not a high net worth individual. Give better financial products and access to loans without necessarily being predatory. Let people make transactions without like really meaningless intermediary fees and things that don't add value. Because ultimately, for the banks, you get to hold that money, and that should be a real privilege. And I think it's not something that normal fintech can address, because again, that's just window dressing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the banks are smart, they'll probably get on top of it. If not, you better watch your back too, I guess.
At least at the Bitcoin level, you're seeing more institutionals getting involved. True. At least from like a hedging and a treasury standpoint, they're using it to either kind of maintain their value levels, or to maybe grow with the swings that are happening. But at the same time, it's like, how do we let that trickle down to normal people again? Like, not just your high net worth people.
I mean, that's a beautiful, bold picture for the future. And I love the space you're in. The more people I talk to this, the more bullish I become on it, the more I start to understand a little bit better. And, I definitely think, it's something that's you're going to benefit from in the next 10, 15, 20 years for sure. So before we wrap up, do you want to plug anything we need to know about Quidli or what you're working on or anything new coming up?
No, well, yeah. I mean, I sure would love to plug Quidli.
Of course.
Please, if you are looking to get involved at all, get any kind of exposure into crypto, notably Bitcoin or Ethereum-based ones. I mean, we're not in the huge speculation market. We're not doing every single token, but if you want to get some kind of easy, light exposure to initiate into crypto, please check out Quidli. We make it as easy as possible for you to either buy or deposit or crypto you already earn into a very manageable interface that you can then use to share with your friends, family, colleagues, teammates, whatever, community members, as well as use. Like, that's something that a lot of people don't do yet in crypto. But it's, at the end of the day, it's cryptocurrency, it's crypto money. So, maybe instead of doing it, using it for like weird things or things you would never be able to do before, use it like a normal person. Like, use it to spend, use it to donate, use it to share with others. To get that first experience on Quidli, please. You'll include the link, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. We'll include all the links. I will attest to the experience. I mean, honestly, it's like a gateway drug. It was very easy to own it, and then I saw it rise really fast. And then of course, like I said, if you give me more use cases, I definitely put more money on. But it's been a great experience. It's still early. It's a product in development, but I think it's getting better every week, every day. Justin, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, it was really fun, man. Thanks for making. I don't know if all the podcast experiences were like this, but it was my first one. It was great. I'm waiting for Spotify to offer me my own contract.
For sure.
Please. Thank you for having me. And if you ever need anything, let me know.
For sure. We'll definitely have you back on for another episode in the future.
Cool. Yeah, do a crypto episode.
Exactly. Purely crypto. Okay. All right. Thanks, Justin.
All right, dude. Cheers.
Hey, listeners. Thanks for listening to another episode of EOA. As usual, if you liked the stories, if you learned something, don't hold back. Share it, spread the love. Write a review, as it helps us a lot. Because of your help, EOA is fast growing to top spots in a few categories across Malaysia. Let's see how far we can take this across the world together. So what did I learn today? The world is big and small at the same time. Justin is the epitome of globalization in a positive way. Him being both American and Korean hasn't held him back in the slightest, as he's making waves from Paris while raising a family, while building out his cryptocurrency startup, Quidli. Exposure, exposure, exposure. For yourself, for your friends, for your kids, for your family. This is what you're looking for if you want to grow. Exposure and being different has served Justin very well. If you heard his full story, you know it was not a straightforward path. Aside from the very tangible lessons such as bootstrapping for as long as you can, hiring for generalists with strong potential for early stage startups, and learning more languages, Justin's mindset of not letting external factors define him and drive him are what really served him on his journey through entrepreneurship, which was clearly rooted in him just being himself growing up and not some minority or cultural stereotype. I hope you guys learned something too. See you guys back here for next week's episode. EOA out.